Imagine this. You were never asked to worship a distant throne. You were invited to unlock a door inside your own chest. You feel it when the room grows quiet and some part of you refuses to trade wonder for certainty. That refusal is not doubt, it's recognition. The earliest followers said Jesus spoke two languages at once, a public tongue for crowds and a private music for those who could bear the voltage. You've heard echoes of that music your whole life and called it coincidence, timing, grace. It keeps finding you anyway. What if the most controversial thing he ever taught was not about rules, but about location? Not what to believe, but where to look. The story you were handed may have been noble, even beautiful, and still only half a map. The other half is hidden in the way he pauses before a parable, in the way he points without pointing, in the way he keeps turning you back toward your own awareness like a compass returned to true north. That gesture is the scandal. The kingdom is not a place you go after obedience. It is a brightness you uncover as you awaken. You don't need anyone's permission to notice this. Close your eyes. No, keep them open. This is not a trance. Look at the fabric of your ordinary day and feel how often you outsource your seeing to the loudest voice in the room. He never shouted over that noise. He slipped under it. He told stories about seeds and lamps and pearls because you already carry soil, flame, and hunger. He never needed to win an argument. He needed you to remember. In a few minutes, you will hear the most dangerous sentence he ever gave a human being. And you will understand why empires prefer gates to keys. But hear this first. You are not invited to become someone else. You are invited to become undivided. The lost wisdom is not exotic. It is intimate. It does not arrive with trumpets. It arrives with the recognition that the distance between you and the divine was mostly taught. Stay with me. Before the end, you will be able to test this without spectacle or permission slips. You will carry a line in your mouth that turns a cathedral back into a doorway, and you will feel, maybe for the first time, why the quiet ones in every age risked everything rather than hand their interior life to someone who had never met it. The secret is not guarded by hatred. It is guarded by hurry. Slow down for the next breath and you will already be closer than most sermons allow. He said the kingdom was near at hand, among you, within you. Not later, not elsewhere. Not behind a paywall of purity, but present like light inside a lantern that forgot it was lit. You have chased it across doctrines and moods and continents and felt it draw back the moment you tried to cage it with perfect words. It draws back because it isn't a prize. It is a presence, and presence cannot be owned, only noticed. Watch how he teaches when he refuses to give you a map with fence lines. He speaks of a field and a hidden treasure. You are the one who digs. He speaks of a pearl that costs everything. You are the one who decides what everything means. He speaks of yeast vanishing into dough until all of it rises. You are the dough, and the vanishing is happening right now in the middle of your life without applause. This is not a code for elites. It is a grammar for courage. You do not ascend by collecting badges. You wake by recognizing the light you've been wrapping in explanations. You can feel the difference instantly. When you outsource holiness, you shrink into compliance. When you consent to the inner kingdom, you straighten, not with pride, but with clarity. Your voice gets quieter and truer. Your kindness stops auditioning. Your fear starts running out of arguments. This is why his worst enemies were never ordinary sinners. They were managers of certainty who could not afford a God that arrives without needing their gate. The inner kingdom is not self-worship. It is self-revelation. It does not erase tradition. It fulfills its aim. The lamp on a stand was never meant to blind you with doctrine. It was meant to show the table where you already sit. When he heals, he does not import magic from elsewhere. He removes the crust that kept your own aliveness from touching you. When he forgives, he does not suspend the law. He corrects the record about who you are beneath the noise of your history. Each act says the same sentence in different accents. What you seek and what you are not enemies. You ask why this was hidden. It wasn't, only disguised by our addiction to distance. Distance lets us delay. If the kingdom is later, you can postpone courage. If it is elsewhere, you can outsource love. But if it is here, you are implicated. You are authorized. You cannot wait for someone holier to go first. That authorization terrifies systems built on mediation. It liberates you. In a minute, we'll open the pages that refuse to kneel to the official story. The sayings that sound like lightning remembered. The voice that keeps telling you to split the wood and lift the stone because the sacred hates being quarantined. You will see why some texts were treasured in caves and why a few names, Thomas, Mary, keep returning like footprints from a parallel path. Keep breathing. The door you thought was in heaven is swinging on a hinge inside your chest. You have heard the official story. 4 Gospels, 1 path, everything else a footnote. In the desert near Nag Hammadi, a buried library waited like a held breath. In jars beneath sand, a memory slept. Pages that sound like a familiar voice speaking in a lower register. Personal, stripped of spectacle. When you read them, you don't feel argued with. You feel recognized. Thomas opens like a door you were sure was a wall. It doesn't narrate miracles, it hands you sayings like flint. It keeps telling you that if you read with the right fire, you won't be borrowing life from anyone else. The kingdom is not scheduled. It's spread out, easy to miss when your attention is outsourced. Lift what is ordinary and you meet what is ultimate. The text won't flatter you. It won't let you hide either. It keeps asking whether you will spend your days decoding other people's certainties or finally interpret your own. Mary speaks with a different courage. Her gospel remembers a conversation after the shock and grief, when leadership looked like fear searching for a throne. She tells what she heard in the silence. The soul rises by recognizing and releasing the forces that feed on it. Ignorance, craving, the glamour of self-importance, the false peace that comes from numbing out. She speaks from authority without performing authority. That alone became intolerable. You know this dynamic. Someone without the right badge tells too much truth and the room starts rearranging reasons. These writings were not lost because they were boring. They were set aside because they are expensive for systems that require a middleman. They move the center of gravity from altar to interior, from surveillance to sincerity. They insist that the teacher trusted you with your own lamp, and that your courage to light it is not rebellion but fidelity. And yes, scholars will argue about dates and authorship and provenance as they should. But underneath the arguments, you hear a tone that does not need to win. It only needs to wake. Give this thread 90 seconds more. Ask yourself what happens in your body when the story shifts from believe harder to notice deeper. You feel the difference, don't you? One path asks you to outsource what is most intimate. The other hands it back and asks you to be responsible for your own seeing. That transfer of trust is the scandal and the relief. It makes you harder to manage and easier to love. In a minute, we will walk into the fork where history chose a highway and a footpath. You will see why institutions grew around one road and why the other survived between friends, in whispers in deserts. You will see that neither road is a villain, but only one insists that you stop postponing the very life you claim to seek. One road builds cathedrals of agreement. It gives you creeds to steady the storm, sacraments to mark the seasons, a calendar to braid your days into meaning. At its best, it protects the ordinary from chaos. It baptizes hunger into hope. It keeps a public flame alive so the night does not swallow the village. Do not despise this road. You were nursed by it in ways you may never fully see. The other road guards the interior flame. It refuses to trade presence for performance. It says you can sit among 1,000 candles and still be dark if your own wick is unlit. It says truth spoken without inner contact turns to stone in the mouth. It remembers the teacher looking you in the eyes as if there were no crowd. as if your next moment mattered more than any doctrine about it. This is the path of Gnosis, not trivia about the sky, but knowledge like breath, tasted from the inside. The roads are not enemies, they are temperaments. But they do collide over custody of your attention. Orthodoxy tends to ask for assent first and experience later. Gnosis asks for experience first and lets assent reorder itself. Orthodoxy promises safety. Stand here, say this, belong. Gnosis promises reality. See clearly, act cleanly, risk being misunderstood. The first will shelter you when you are tired. The second will not let you sleep through your life. You have already walked on both. You know the comfort of shared words and the power of shared song. You also know the moment when shared words became a costume and the song stopped touching you. On that day, the two roads were no longer lines in a book. They were choices in your chest. You could smother the discomfort and call it humility, or you could follow the discomfort to its source and call it obedience to the truth you claim to love. If you choose the inner road, you do not have to burn bridges. You simply stop asking them to carry a weight they were never built to hold. You keep what helps you remember and let go of what helps you forget. You bless the forms that framed your first yes. Then you follow the living presence that keeps asking for another. You do not leave the village in contempt. You walk its edges with gratitude, and when the night is clear, you step into the fields and look up until your eyes adjust. In 60 seconds, you will be handed the grammar of his symbols. The way seeds, pearls, vines, and the cross itself form a map you can carry without announcing it to anyone. This is where the two roads meet again, quietly, inside you. The public story remains. The private music grows louder. And the next time someone asks where the kingdom is, you won't point at the horizon. You'll feel your spine lengthen and answer with your life. Give this part 2 minutes, and the scattered hints you've felt your whole life will start snapping into a single line. Jesus did not teach in a vacuum. He taught in a crossroads. Egypt still whispered initiation stories about the soul's double and its journey through tests of light and shadow. The Hermetic voices said mind and cosmos mirror one another. That the craft of attention is how a human being becomes transparent to the real. None of this cancels what you were taught later. It deepens the stage on which those words were first spoken. You have seen these bridges without naming them. The star over a stable and the eye that notices you in silence. The ladder in a dream and the way a name changes when it is spoken with love. Mystery schools trained perception, not arrogance. They use symbols the way a harbor uses lighthouses. Quiet marks that align you with a channel you can't see at noon. As above, so below was not a slogan to collect. It was a posture to inhabit. If your inner architecture rhymes with the larger one, you stop fighting the tide and start navigating it. Picture a temple wall lined with measured ratios, circles nested inside squares, a spiral that keeps returning while never repeating. Those patterns weren't pagan decor. They were memory aids for a species that forgets by lunchtime. The early Christian imagination didn't have to steal that language. It already breathed it. A baptism becomes a passage. A meal becomes a recognition. A desert becomes a mirror where you can finally see what keeps borrowing your face. When he says the kingdom is within, you are hearing the Hermetic grammar translated into the dialect of mercy. This is why the old maps feel familiar even when you've never read them. The Ka and Ba of Egypt, the emanations of Kabbalah, the concentric heavens of the philosophers. Different costumes for one choreography. Light descends, takes on weight, remembers itself, and rises without despising the ground it walked. You are not asked to master these systems. You are asked to notice how your own days obey the same curve when you stop living on borrowed certainty. By the end of the next section, you will be able to read his parables as coordinates and the cross itself as a compass. Not to argue with anyone, but to carry a map that unfolds anywhere. Train car, hospital corridor, kitchen table, and points in the same direction every time. Inward, upward, through. He did not hand you a manual. He handed you seeds. A seed disappears into soil and then the field acts like it has always been a field. That is how the inner kingdom moves, quietly, decisively, without asking your ego for headlines. When he speaks of yeast, he is telling you that what is most transformative works from the inside until everything tastes different. When he speaks of a pearl that costs everything, he is asking whether you will finally trade your clever explanations for the single thing that makes you honest. Listen to the cadence, lamps that shouldn't be hidden, nets that catch more than you planned, a treasure that makes selling your old life feel like relief. None of this flatters your laziness. All of it respects your freedom. He refuses to make you a spectator to your own salvation. He keeps returning responsibility to your attention because that is where love becomes a decision rather than a mood. And then the sign that history tried to freeze into one meaning, the cross. You have seen it as pain and ransom. You are allowed to see it as axis and alignment. The vertical beam says presence descends into time. The horizontal says presence embraces the human span. Relationships, seasons, the work that wears your name. Where they meet is the heart, not as sentiment but as center. To take up your cross is not to fetishize suffering. It is to stand where heaven and earth intersect in you and refuse to abandon either. Resurrection in this grammar is not a stunt. It is the moment consciousness stops mistaking its costumes for its core. I die daily, said the apostle, not as despair but as practice. Let the false self exhaust its claims and what cannot die begins to breathe. This is why the earliest communities spoke of new birth as something that happens now. If you postpone it to a date on a calendar beyond your last heartbeat, you miss the doorway already open in this one. Even the ordinary acts were encrypted kindness. A table becomes revelation because hunger and gratitude share a language. Washing feet becomes theology because power kneels and remembers what it is for. Storms go quiet not because wind fears a syllable, but because attention anchored in the source stops adding panic to weather. You have felt small versions of this. A room changes temperature when someone finally tells the truth. A day lightens when you forgive without announcing it. These are not side effects. They are the work itself. Here is your rehook. By the end of this video, you will carry 3 lines you can test anywhere. 1. If a rule cannot survive the question, who benefits? It is not sacred, it is inherited. 2. If a practice makes you more precise and more loving, keep it. If it makes you proud and less present, lay it down. 3. If the symbol you hold no longer opens you, it has become an idol. Thank it for what it gave and move on. This is not rebellion for its own sake. This is fidelity to the one who kept turning you back to the living center. Stay with me. The single sentence I promised, the one that unlocks any room from the inside, arrives before we close. Give this part 2 minutes and you will feel why the earliest friends of the teacher never waited for permission to begin. The way is not a ceremony, it is a posture. You take it every time you refuse to trade presents for applause. You take it when you let a sentence arrive clean, without the armor of performance. You take it when you put your hand back on the small living thread that runs through the center of an ordinary hour, and refuse to let the noise rename it. The Christ within is not a costume you put on. It is a center you stop abandoning. It does not arrive with lightning. It arrives the moment you decide to tell the smallest possible truth instead of the most impressive version of yourself. It arrives when you forgive someone who will never know you did and notice how your chest becomes lighter than the story you were about to tell. It arrives when you look at a rule that always frightened you into obedience and realize its power was alone taken out on your attention. This remembrance is fierce and gentle at once. It refuses to flatter your defenses, but it will not humiliate you either. It asks for honesty, not theatrics. It asks for care, not perfection. You do not need to master a library to begin. You need to stop outsourcing your conscience and let your own seeing count. When you catch yourself narrating your value to an invisible jury, you pause, not to make a scene, but to return to a sentence that fits in one breath. I am not small. I am exact. From that exactness, the next simple act becomes obvious. You will notice how quickly the world tries to draft you back into rehearsal. Metrics recruit your motives. Deadlines confiscate your attention. Tribal signals bait you into choosing a side you don't believe in. The inner kingdom does not require you to disappear from your life to stay faithful. It asks you to re-enter it awake. Answer the message, but don't let the message author you. Join the meeting, but bring a line the room forgot to protect. What are we for? Spend money, but not the kind you cannot earn back. Your awareness. When the older texts speak of ascent, they do not imagine you floating out of time. They remember how a person rises inside the task already in their hands. You cook and the kitchen turns into a chapel with no sign on the door. You sit at a bedside and the air learns a new quiet that does not ask the clock for help. You write, and the sentence stops auditioning to be admired and starts wanting to be true. This is not spectacle. It is alignment. The cross you carry becomes less a weight and more a place to stand. Will you stumble? Yes. The false self hates to retire. It will offer you one more dramatic monologue, one more performance disguised as purpose. Smile at it. Let it talk, then choose the smaller, faithful act again. The path does not punish you for forgetting. It hands you 1,000 chances to remember. Each time you do, fear loses a little market share in your body. Before the end, you will carry one question that opens any locked moment from the inside. It does not require a ritual. It requires your consent to reality. Ask it at the worst possible time and watch how the room tilts in your favor. Not because you won, but because the truth stopped needing an audience. Here is the question. If the kingdom is within, what keeps you from living as if that were already true? Not lack of worth. You were never unworthy. Not lack of access. The door is where you are. What keeps you is habit, the soft inertia of a life narrated by other people's certainty. Break that narration, and the horizon moves from the future into your next breath. The secret you came for is not a password. It is a transfer of trust. The teacher did not ask you to build a monument to his memory. He asked you to become porous to the same presence that moved through him. That presence does not erase your face. It completes it. It does not cancel your past. It redeems your attention so the past stops pretending to be a prophecy. When you let it through, you don't become louder. You become clear. And clarity is the most subversive light in a world trained to trade wonder for noise. You are not invited to worship a distance. You are invited to inhabit a union, human and divine meeting in the ordinary center where your choices live. Let the vertical find you where you stand. Let the horizontal feel your weight as a blessing, not a burden. Refuse the old bargain that told you holiness means absence from the world. Holiness means presence in it, unconfused about who you are. Here is the sentence I promised, the one you can carry anywhere. What would the truth do here? Not the brand, not the tribe, not the fear, not the costume. The truth. Ask it in the hallway after the hard meeting. Ask it at the threshold of an old habit. Ask it when you are about to choose cleverness over kindness. The answer will not flatter you. It will free you. And every time you obey it, the Christ within becomes less an idea and more your way of being. You don't have to convince anyone. You don't have to win a war against systems older than your grandparents. You only have to stop abandoning the light that keeps trying your name on as if it were its favorite word. Do that in private and watch how public storms lose their grip. Do that with a steady heart and watch how performance looks cheap next to presence. This is where the roads meet. The village keeps its flame and you keep your interior fire. The symbols return to being doors. The story returns to being a path. And you, who were taught to wait for rescue, finally recognize the rescuer who has been knocking from the inside. Become what you seek. Not tomorrow. Now, in the middle of an unromantic hour with no music swelling and no spotlight chasing your steps. Let your life answer the question it was born to carry. Let the kingdom stop being a rumor and start being your tone. And when someone asks where you found it, you won't need to point at a map. You'll look at them the way the teacher looked at you, as if nothing essential were missing. And you'll tell the truth.